Thank you very much, and it's always good to be here among friends. I appreciate that you're doing this leadership conference today, mainly because Nick has always just gotten it. He understands what it means to connect the State House with the private sector. And the fact is, we are all going through challenges, and the private sector is going through a roller coaster like we've never seen. But that means you have to be more connected to what's going on in Columbia, more connected to what's going on in Washington, more connected to your elected officials than you ever have before. I will remind you, I never ever cared about politics, was never going to be in politics, never thought I'd run for the House of Representatives, certainly never thought I would run for governor. But it was out of being aggravated that I didn't think government understood what businesses were going through. That's what it was. That's all it was. And so I decided to run for the State House to see why there weren't more business people in it. So keep that in mind as you go forward. When you go back and you talk to your groups, always remind them, don't complain about it, do something about it. Know who your elected officials are, and remember they work for you. So when you have a question, there's no question that's too dumb to ask. There's no answer that they should not be able to give you. You need to ask them what they're doing and why they're doing it. And the way that y'all have your grassroots network, through the e-blasts and the emails and the phone calls, I can tell you as a legislator, it works. When we started getting those realtor emails in, it made an impression. So let everybody know that when a constituent contacts them, it does make a big difference. What we're trying to focus on right now is what I've been focused on all year, and that is jobs. Because if we can get more people a job, they will buy more houses, and we will continue to help families. So that's the goal. The way we're doing that is trying to connect commerce with tourism. Because you hear me constantly say Charleston was named the #1 tourist destination in the country. Well, I do that in part to sell South Carolina. I do that in part because when we have these companies come to South Carolina, they care enough about quality of life as anything else. Because if they're going to have employees in the state, if they're going to have business executives in the state, the environment that they put them in matters. And so I spend as much time talking to them about how great the low country is, how great the upstate is, how great these rural communities are, as I do with anything else. So you will see that we are putting Bobby Hitt with Commerce in with Dwayne Parrish. They're connecting. You're going to see them brand together, really start to sell the state in a strong way together. There is no place that I go, whether it is in state or out of state, that I am not selling our great state. I am incredibly proud of South Carolina. And in a time where my governor colleagues and other states are struggling, we are doing better. Not great, better. And I can tell you that because this past year, $5 billion worth of investments in South Carolina, 20,000 new jobs announced in South Carolina. That says something. And what we're working on is diversifying. We saw what happened with the textile industry when it was just textiles. We're never going to let that happen again. We're going to make sure we've got enough industries that no matter what happens, we've got a good balance. That's why the focus is on automotive, aerospace, high manufacturing, research and development, all of those. But the best part is we build things in South Carolina. We build planes, we build cars, we build tires, we now make medicine. All of those things matter. And they matter because we are focusing on the business environment in our state. The main things that any company comes in looking for that wants to come to South Carolina, the main thing that our current businesses now are looking for is how to keep the cost of doing business low. The way you keep the cost of doing business low is regulations need to stay at a minimal. Fees need to stay low. You will see all of our agencies have reduced their fees, reduced their regulations. I hope you've seen a dramatic increase in LLR and how they work. All of those things have made a big difference because they understand that time is money. And if you are costing a business time, you are costing them money, and under the Haley administration, that is unacceptable. The second thing is training, workforce training. I have a lot of my current companies now saying we need a little bit more help with workforce training. We need a little bit more help to make sure that as we get more high tech, that the workforce is moving along with us. You will see at the end of the month, we're going to roll out another new training tool with one of the great private sector companies that we have in this country to come in and really fine tune the workforce training so that we are tailoring it more to the companies that need it. What I don't want is what we had in the past, which is we had a lot of companies that needed employees and a lot of workers that needed jobs. We're connecting the dots. How do we get these people back? And when I started, the unemployment was at 10.5. And we started bringing all these jobs in, and I said, why isn't the unemployment going down? what is the problem? And we knew we were filling the funnel. That was the big thing, was fill the funnel with as many jobs as we could. What we didn't know was that the workforce was going to expand at the same time. A lot of people who had retired had to come out of retirement because they could no longer live off of their income. A lot of college graduates came out of school and had no jobs. And then we had a small sector that got excited about all the new job announcements and said, well, I'm going to try again. So they jumped back into the workforce. So what we saw was while we filled the funnel, the workforce grew that much more. It just means I need to work harder, and I will. But what you are going to see is we've had that 10.5 drop to 9.9. We're going to continue to try and see it drop more as we aggressively recruit more companies. Finally, I will tell you, I love the fact that we are one of the least unionized states in the country. Probably my best economic development tool, because that is the one thing companies love, is not only that we don't have to fight the unions as much, but that there's a governor who is flat out saying we don't want you in our state. So it makes a big difference with what they're trying to do, because they've suffered a lot on their bottom line in dealing with those fights back and forth. What we saw with what happened with Boeing, and let me tell you that story again because I think it needs to be repeated over and over again, is that Boeing came to us at a time where our spirits needed it, where the economy needed it, where the state was yearning for it, created 1,000 new jobs in Charleston. At the same time, expanded 2,000 jobs in Washington State. Not one person was hurt, not one. And the National Labor Relations Board and President Obama said, no, you can't do that because it's a right-to-work state. Now that was when the red flag went up, because when we have to start worrying about being a right-to-work state, that actually hurt all states. I feel bad for Washington State, because who's ever going to go put a business there if they think that when you go to a non-right-to-work state you can't leave, or that you can't expand in a right-to-work state? So it really, for the first time, put business on trial. Good news is they dropped that suit. Boeing is doing just fine. We're expecting to see some good big Mac Daddy planes come out there during the spring this year, and I think it's really going to cause quite a stir in South Carolina. What it did for me was say, if they could do this when we are a strong right-to-work state, then we need to do more. So you are going to see this legislative session, we are going to put stronger laws in place. One is we're going to make sure that they have to show us all of their financial statements. Private sector already has to do that when it comes to dealing with unions. They're going to have to show us the salaries that the union bosses make, what goes into all of the income, who pays the income into the unions, and where does their money go out, which politicians are they paying. All of that is going to be open. Unions thrive when there's secrecy. The more sunlight you put on them, the more you can kind of expose what's happening. But the important part is, the reason we don't have unions in South Carolina is because we have companies that understand they're only as good as the workers that take care of them. So there is a good relationship between our employers and our employees. You could send a union into Michelin, Boeing, or BMW, and the employees would tell them to get out because they love the direct relationship they have. So that says a lot, I think, about the companies that are already in South Carolina and the fact that we don't need a middleman in there. But we're going to do more things like that, to where right now they've got different types of things. That there's a persuader rule that the NLRB came down, and it says all private companies, when they're in a union compromise or confrontation, they have to disclose everything the private sector finds out from consultation. All the advice that the company is given, they have to disclose. All of that information has to be disclosed, but the unions don't. We're going to say, well, if the private sector has to disclose it, the union should have to disclose it. So all we're trying to do is create a fair, balanced, competitive environment for the unions. The other thing I will tell you is we had a great win last year with tort reform. We were the only state in the Southeast that still didn't cap frivolous lawsuits. The legislature passed it. I signed the bill into law. Great win for South Carolina on that front, but we have to take it one step further and go to a loser pay system. When we go to a loser pay system, we won't see any frivolous lawsuits because people will think twice before they sue. So that's where we're trying to encourage the legislature to go. Tax reform, tax reform, tax reform. How many years have we heard about that? I'm even tired of hearing about that. So what we're doing is, the accountant in me can look at the tax structure and say that it's broken. You're all feeling that it's broken. The reason the legislature hasn't been able to move forward with tax reform is because you can't conquer it all in one swoop without just throwing the budget completely out of whack. And so that was their fear. So what I did was I basically said, look, I'm going to give you 4 years worth of tax reform phases that we need to do. And every year we phase in tax reform. So what it is I included it in my executive budget. It's already paid for. I've already shown them how to do it so that there is no shot in the arm in the budget. And the first thing we're trying to do is we're trying to simplify the individual income tax from 6 brackets to 3 brackets. Basically, anybody making $5,600 or more would see a tax deduction. And it's not through a credit, it's not through an exemption, it's not through a loophole, it is an actual decline in rate. So we're getting rid of rates 4, 5, and 6 is basically what that comes down to. We're looking at the corporate income tax, phasing out the corporate income tax completely over the next 4 years, doing a quarter each year for the next 4 years. Hugely important when we're recruiting businesses into South Carolina. Everybody says, well, you already have a low corporate income tax rate. Well, just imagine how many more companies will come when they see that we've lowered it even more. And then one of the other things is we've got one of the highest manufacturing taxes in the country, 10.5%. We are going to go and try and put in a constitutional amendment that allows us to pull the tax structure out so that we can change it and move that from 10.5 to 6. That will make a big difference because you won't hear about the BMWs and the Boeings talking about that. But our little guys that may just employ 25, 30 people, if you gave them that kind of tax break, the cash flow and profit margin and extra income they would get from that, they're going to expand and hire more people. That's how it works. It's all we need to focus on. Is whatever gives a business cash flow, whatever gives them profit margin, we need to focus on because they will invest back into their business and go forward. Then finally, I think the big albatross that we've been dealing with that I think we're definitely going to have to focus on that's not going to be fun is pension reform. We, back in 1999, had $199 million of unfunded liability, $199 million. Today, we have $17 billion in unfunded liability that we owe, and we have no way to pay for it. So what that means is you've got a lot of retirees that are saying, I need my retirement, and we're saying, we will give you what you were promised because we get that. But we've got a lot of current retirees, state employees now that we've got to do something because if we don't, no one's going to get retirement. We made a good first step. We reduced the rate of return from 8% to 7.5%. Wouldn't we all love to get a 7.5% rate of return on our investments? So we did reduce that out, but we're going to have to make some changes. In the House and Senate, they both have committees working on this, which is a good step forward. Our communications with them have been good. We're probably going to have to look at, instead of retiring in 28 years, you retire in 30. We're going to have to look at going into like the military. You can retire, but you don't get your payouts for a certain year. Just imagine if somebody works for the state of South Carolina at 18 years old. After 30 years at 48, if we start paying it out, that's a tremendous amount of money compared to age 60 or age 65. So we'll have to look at things like that. Got to get rid of the Terry program once and for all, close it out. They've held on to it forever. It's time to let that go. We also, more than anything, this is the perfect opportunity to get rid of the General Assembly's retirement. You know, we need to give them the exact same retirement that every other state employee has. No extra, and just be fair to everybody. So those are all things that I think are going forward. I feel good about where we are. You know, 10.5 to 9.9, is that a huge jump? No, but when I think about it in terms of people and jobs, and if we can keep bringing that down, which I think we will, and we'll see that over the next few months, it's going to make a difference. What I ask of you is to continue to stay in touch with me. Let me know what you need. Nick knows how to get in touch with me at any given time, and stay active now more than ever, especially with this tax reform, especially with restructuring and everything we're doing. Let the legislators know that you're paying attention. That's the best help you can give me, and that's the best help you can give your state. So with that, I will open it up for any questions you have. And keep in mind, you do have media in the back of the room, so I will just caution you on that. Media, I'll do an avail right afterwards. Yes. You know, the ports, and I will go further to say it's not just the Port of Charleston. It's Jasper, it's Georgetown. What I wanted when I started this administration was a business plan. What I saw as a legislator was a state that was piecemeal. They would pick 2 or 3 issues and they'd work on those issues. Well, it's like the game my kids play where they hit the Gophers. You can't touch one thing without it affecting every other part of the state. And so the ports are something I am very committed to. We started a fund in the executive budget to start $25 million we put into that, because as we go through this research and this dredging, the state's going to have to pony up some money, and I want us to be ready for that. I've worked directly with the federal delegation to make sure we get the funding we need for the Port of Charleston. What I will tell you is, as a legislator and coming in as governor, one of the biggest political monsters we had was DHEC. And DHEC was always too slow, and it was too political. All a legislator had to do was make one sound, and they'd literally stop working. And it had too much influence. And so what I did was I replaced the entire DHEC board. I put all business people on there, and it is chaired by the president of the construction company, who understands time is money. And when that board came on, I said, set benchmarks, whatever those benchmarks are. If they meet it, give them the permit and give it quickly. If they don't meet it, deny it and deny it quickly. And don't let any legislators get in your way. Do what is right. That's the only instructions DHEC got. So what happened with the Port of Charleston was Governor Deal from Georgia came and said, rather than the staff hear our appeal for getting a permit for Savannah, can your board hear the appeal? Well, that is a perfectly acceptable request that any governor can make to another governor. And so I said, yes, you can, I can ask them and see if the board will hear it. So I requested the board, said, would you be willing to hear Governor Deal and his staff directly? They said yes, out of courtesy, and they did. Nothing else happened outside of that. When we came into this, Georgia didn't meet the requirements. They didn't meet any of the oxidation levels. They didn't meet any of the funding. They didn't meet any of the things that they needed to meet. After they gave their information and they realized that they didn't meet that through staff and everything else, we got a call that afternoon or somewhere around there, and they said, it's probably not going to work. And we were like, well, that's fine. If they don't meet the benchmarks, they don't. We really didn't, one way or the other, the whole goal was to keep the political influence out. Well, overnight, they came through on the financial part of it. 50 years worth of financing and processing and everything that they needed to do, they went above and beyond to do it. So they met the benchmark. On top of that, the Corps of Engineers in writing said, we don't need South Carolina to be able to approve this for us to give it to Georgia anyway. DHEC approved it. They did the right thing. They did exactly what they were supposed to. They weren't political. They set the benchmarks. Georgia met it. Georgia got the permit. Now what everybody is doing is panicking, because in South Carolina we think we've got to cut the feet of our neighbor to turn around and win. And I disagree. You compete, you're strong, you fight, and you win on merit. You don't win by cutting the feet out from your neighbor. I am not worried, and I have said this over and over again, of a 48-foot Savannah 36 feet down the road that can't get two-way traffic, when I know Charleston's going to be 50 feet, dual-way, stronger, less work to be done. We're going to be fine. But what I do believe you're seeing is a knee-jerk reaction by the legislature, a knee-jerk reaction by some that are panicked that this is going to mean something against Charleston. It's not. I have too much invested. Continental Tire, Michelin, Boeing, all of those. The ports are a big part of that. But I'm not going to pick one port over the other. I mean, mine is, I want Charleston to be strong and have a lot of container ships coming in and out of there. I want the overflow to go to Jasper, so that they've got a lot going out of there, and I want to set up a plan for Georgetown. There's no reason all three can't be successful. So as governor, I'm not going to pick one or the other. And two, I'm not, instead of whining and complaining about the fact that Savannah got their permit, the first thing I did was get on the phone with Governor Deal and the U.S. senators and said, I want you to put into writing that you're going to support the funding that we need for the Charleston port, and that you will support anything we need through the Corps of Engineers. They immediately turned around and sent me a letter. So I've gotten things from them to make sure that we did it. And Lindsey Graham said it was the best thing that happened, because he said there was no way he could get the funding as long as we had a fight with Georgia, because we weren't getting anywhere. So to me, you turn whatever challenges you have into an opportunity. I'm not worried. We're going to be fine. We're going to continue to meet. Everything's going to be okay when it comes to Charleston. Yes. The Jasper port basically is, what they did was we also got Georgia Governor Deal and senators to say they would support the Jasper port. And, you know, what happened was we saw the Charleston Ports Board say we're not going to fund Jasper anymore. And what we are saying is that's short-sighted. You can't just say we're going to fund one and not the other. All three of these deserve time and have a separate business plan so they all move forward at the same time. The idea that we have to do Charleston first and then Jasper, and if, you know, God forbid, whenever it comes, you get to Georgetown, is just short-sighted. That's not how business people think. And so my goal is that we are going to make sure that Jasper has a plan. We are meeting the Georgia ports and the South Carolina ports, so both governors will be meeting. We have meetings every other month, and the sole purpose is to meet on Jasper. So I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that Jasper is just as successful. And it's like I said, I don't think we have to pick one over the other. I think both can be equally successful. Any other questions? Yes. That's it. Oh, you know, that was interesting. I'm glad it's over. Trying to get through legislative session and state of the state in a presidential primary probably took as much energy out of me as I thought possible. You know, I mean, I will tell you, I love the energy that comes out in primaries. I think South Carolina represented well. I think the people represented well. What I said to all the national press was the people of South Carolina are smart. They make their candidates fight and earn what they're going to get. And, you know, at the end of the day, they know their issues. And I strongly believe that the people of South Carolina showed that. I think that, you know, hats off to Newt Gingrich. I think that he had a very good week leading up to the primary. You know, my support continues to be with Governor Romney. I want to see a jobs president. That's who I've always wanted to see in the White House. But I think it was good. I think it was interesting. You know, when I first came in and endorsed, Newt was 20 points up. And then it's interesting, and I think it's indicative of this entire election process, whether it was Iowa or New Hampshire, the roller coaster that we continue to see is absolutely amazing. And I think it's because if you look at the role debates have played, I can't ever think of a time where debates have played such a role in elections as this one has. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a great thing. But I think it shows that these candidates have to step up. If they have a bad night, they suffer for it. They have a good night, they win off of it, but at the end of the day, the people are making them work for it. And I think they should, because this election's too important to not have that happen. What I will tell you is we've got a lot of things. I mean, this month is full of economic development calls and meetings and all those things, trying to continue to bring in the big projects. But in terms of the jobs, what I'm trying to do is not just focus on Greenville, Charleston, and Columbia. I love those areas, and they always do well. But if you notice the jobs announcements we've had, they've been in Denmark and Marlboro and Jasper and Clarendon. We're really Union and Lawrence. We're trying to get them into all of these other areas, because those high unemployment areas, if we can lift up those really challenged areas, the outer layers are going to be automatically quickly affected. So you're going to see that we're really trying to go in that direction and bring them. But what I want your takeaway to be is companies want to come. We have a great state. They see that. They see it from the quality of life. They see it from the cost of doing business being low. They see the fact that they're a big fish in a small pond. So they see that we're very pro-business and that we fight for the things that we believe in. So we've got a great state. All I'm doing is selling it. And what I ask is that you make sure, as I am, is that the legislature stay focused on pro-business legislation. If it's good for business, it's good for us. If it's not good for business, it's a waste of time and we don't need it. And so right now, the number one focus has to be business friendly or nothing. Thank y'all very much. I appreciate it.